Melbourne in 1942 was a city holding its breath. The Second World War was not a distant headline, it was a palpable presence on the streets. Thousands of American GIs had arrived, bringing with them a strange mix of excitement and tension. They were allies, saviors even, but their swagger and foreign ways sometimes clashed with the more reserved Australian culture. This influx of soldiers turned the city into a bustling, anxious hub. Dance halls were full, but so were the undercurrents of unease. The war felt very close, and the city's usual rhythm was replaced by the constant humming anxiety of a nation on high alert. Adding to this atmosphere was the brownout. To deter potential Japanese air raids, Melbourne was plunged into a semi-darkness every night. Streetlights were dimmed to a faint ghostly glow. Windows were covered with thick black curtains. People navigating the streets after sunset did so in a world of deep shadows and muted light. This wasn't complete darkness, but something more unsettling. A world where shapes were distorted and every corner held a potential threat. The familiar cityscape became a labyrinth of uncertainty, a perfect hunting ground for someone who thrived in the shadows and fed on the fear that permeated the very air. Into this strange, darkened world stepped Private Edward Joseph Leonski. To his fellow soldiers in the 52nd Signal Battalion, he was just Eddie. He was a big, friendly guy, known for his broad smile and seemingly gentle nature. He was quick to buy a round of drinks and seemed harmless, if a little odd. But beneath this affable exterior lurked a deeply troubled mind. Leonski carried with him a darkness that had nothing to do with the city's wartime precautions. He was a man wrestling with demons, an obsession taking root that would soon turn the city's general anxiety into specific, terrifying horror. The presence of American troops was a double-edged sword for the locals. While they represented protection against a common enemy, they also created social friction. There were stories of fights, romances, and a general sense of two different worlds colliding. The phrase overpaid, oversexed, and overhere became a common, if resentful, refrain among some Australians. This tension formed the backdrop for the events that would follow. When the killings began, the fear was not just of a random madman, but of the possibility that the danger was coming from within the ranks of their supposed protectors. The terror began on May 3rd, 1942. Ivy Violet McLeod, a 40-year-old woman, was found brutally murdered in a park in South Melbourne. She had been strangled and beaten. The city was shocked, but in a time of war, a single act of violence could almost be lost in the larger chaos. 6 days later, the fear intensified. Another woman, 40-year-old Pauline Thompson, was discovered. She had also been strangled, her body left near her home. A pattern was emerging. Both attacks were savage, and both occurred under the cloak of the brownout. The killer was using the city's own defense mechanism as his weapon, turning the shadowy streets into his personal stage. The third and final murder cemented the city's panic. On May 18th, 31-year-old Gladys Hosking was attacked while walking home from her job at the University of Melbourne. She was dragged into the grounds of Camp Pell, an American military base. A sentry heard her screams, but by the time he arrived, it was too late. Gladys was dead, another victim of the strangler. Now Melbourne was in the grip of genuine terror. Women were afraid to walk alone at night. The brownout strangler, as the press dubbed him, was no longer a phantom. He was a real and present danger, and he seemed to be hiding among the American soldiers. What investigators and the public couldn't yet know was the bizarre motive driving the killer. Eddie Leonski was obsessed with women's voices. He wasn't driven by robbery or conventional lust. In his twisted mind, he believed that by strangling these women, he could somehow capture their beautiful voices. He later confessed that he killed them to get their voices. He would hear a woman sing or speak, become entranced, and feel an overwhelming compulsion to possess that sound. This strange, almost childlike reasoning made his crimes all the more chilling. He was a predator who stalked his prey based on the simple, beautiful act of speaking or singing. His behavior among his fellow soldiers was becoming increasingly erratic. He was known for his heavy drinking, often going on binges that left him in a state of near stupor. During these episodes, his friendly demeanor would vanish, replaced by something more volatile and unpredictable. He would talk about strange things, his moods swinging wildly. Covered in mud and scratches after the last murder, he told a friend he'd been in a fight. No one connected his odd behavior to the string of killings. To them, he was just goofy, drunk Eddie, not a cold-blooded murderer who preyed on the city's women in the dark. The murder of Gladys Hosking, right on the doorstep of an American army camp, was the killer's fatal mistake. The witness, Private Anthony Gallo, had seen the attacker in the gloom. He described a disheveled American soldier smelling of alcohol. This crucial piece of information narrowed the search dramatically. Suspicion quickly fell upon Private Leonsky, whose erratic behavior and muddy uniform on the night of the murder matched the profile. When questioned, Leonsky, perhaps burdened by guilt or simply not clever enough to maintain a lie, confessed to all 3 murders with unnerving calmness and detail. The friendly GI was unmasked as the monster. The arrest of an American soldier for crimes against Australian civilians presented a complex legal and diplomatic problem. Who had the right to try him? The Australian government, under immense public pressure to see justice done, initially wanted to handle the case. However, under a wartime agreement known as the Visiting Forces Act, a United States soldier who committed a crime in a host country would be tried under American military law. General Douglas MacArthur, the Supreme Commander of Allied forces in the Southwest Pacific, insisted that the US military would handle the trial, promising swift and severe justice to appease the horrified Australian public. The court-martial of Private Eddie Leonsky began on July 17, 1942. It was a landmark case, the first time a US soldier was tried for capital crimes committed in Australia under such an agreement. The prosecution laid out the chilling details of the murders and Leonsky's confession, including his bizarre motive about wanting to steal voices. His defense team argued that he was insane, pointing to his heavy drinking and history of strange behavior. They claimed he was not mentally responsible for his actions, a man lost to a form of madness exacerbated by alcohol. The military court, however, was not swayed by this plea of insanity. After a short trial, the verdict was delivered. Eddie Leonsky was found guilty of all 3 murders and sentenced to death by hanging. The decision was a powerful statement. It demonstrated to the Australian people that the United States would not shelter its own criminals and was committed to maintaining order and justice, even in the midst of a global conflict. The sentence was meant to be a deterrent and a way to repair the fragile trust between the 2 allied nations, a trust that Leonsky's brutal actions had severely damaged. The friendly soldier's fate was now sealed by the very military he had served. On November 9, 1942, just 6 months after his first murder, Eddie Leonsky was executed. The sentence was carried out at Melbourne's Pentridge Prison, but it was an American affair. The executioner was a US military police sergeant, and the procedure followed American military protocol. Leonsky went to the gallows calmly. His execution was a historic moment, the first and only time a foreign serviceman has been executed under his own country's laws on Australian soil. It brought a grim closure to the city of Melbourne, which could now turn off its dimmed lights with a little less fear, knowing the brownout strangler was gone for good. The case of Eddie Leonsky left a deep and lasting scar on the collective memory of Melbourne. He became a bogeyman, a chilling reminder of a time when the war brought danger not just from the sky, but from the very streets below. The story was passed down through generations, a cautionary tale about the darkness that can hide behind a smiling face. The brownout conditions, Leonsky's friendly facade, and his strange obsession with voices created a perfect storm of horror that was both uniquely of its time and universally terrifying. He was more than a murderer. He was a symbol of the hidden anxieties of wartime life. The notoriety of the brownout strangler has ensured his story continues to be told. The case has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and even a feature film, Death of a Soldier, released in 1986. These portrayals delve into the psychology of Leonsky, the wartime atmosphere of Melbourne, and the unique legal circumstances of his trial. They explore the strange duality of his character, the polite, smiling soldier and the brutal, obsessive killer. The story continues to fascinate because it touches on so many complex themes: the chaos of war, cultural clashes, and the disturbing nature of psychopathy. Ultimately, the chilling tale of Eddie Leonsky serves as a dark footnote in the history of the US-Australian alliance during World War II. It highlights the immense social pressures and underlying tensions that existed between the Yanks and their Australian hosts. While the alliance was crucial for winning the war, the Leonsky case was a stark reminder that bringing together thousands of young men from different cultures in a high-stress environment could have unforeseen and tragic consequences. The friendly soldier who became a monster remains one of the war's most unsettling and memorable stories from the home front.